Thank you for waiting. We would now like to welcome our second presenter, who is from Echigo Kadoire Washi, Director Mr. Yasuo Kobayashi. Mr. Kobayashi is from Kashiwazaki City, Niigata Prefecture. In 1982, he took an Israeli, Izhar Newman, as his apprentice. Ever since, Mr. Kobayashi has been receiving various apprentices, and later he also took a consigned project from architect Kengo Kuma. After establishing his own paper mill, Koshi no Kigami Kobo, in 2016, as part of a new attempt of the Japan House project in São Paulo, Brazil, he made a mesh washi using metal screen in the paper making process. Mr. Kobayashi, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. As you can see me, I really live as I want to be like, and I am a super analog person. And suddenly yesterday, I decided I wanted to show some paper cards and some artwork, so I asked the cameraman to take them during my presentation. So it's not going to be so smart and things can be a little bit clumsy, but I hope you understand that. In starting, I would like to ask some pictures to be shown here. Oops, it's opposite. And of course, today's topic is washi paper, but before that, I would like to introduce to you the word kigami. And let me explain to you about what kigami is. Actually, it was only when I was in grade 4, so when I was around 10 years old, in my social studies textbook, I only got to know about the word washi. And that was a time my classmates all told me, it seems like the word washi means the kigami that your father is making, Yasuo. My name is Yasuo, by the way. That's what I remember. That means we all didn't know the word washi. And in the Meiji period, in the 1960s and later on, when Japan opened its door to Europe, that was a time when paper from Europe came in, and for us to distinguish the paper locally made and the Western paper, we started to use the word washi. But until then, the locally made paper was called kigami, and even the locally brewed sake was called kizake. And that's how we kept on calling about the locally made paper as kigami. And only when I was in grade 4 elementary school, I got to know that there was a word called washi. And later, when I was 18 years old, well, in high school, I decided to succeed my father's business. And from 19 years old, I also started to work to do fundraising, and I also engaged in many other things. And when I started, well, washi is made of the mulberry tree, the plant, and this is a branch of mulberry, kozo in Japanese, and as you can see here, mulberry, paper bush, diplomorpha, there are various woods, but we use the bark. The point is that we use the bark, and we call the core of the wood as the pulp, but pulp is used for Western paper. And by using bark, we can make use of the fiber, and even if you fold it hundreds or thousands of times, the paper will be still robust and strong. And also the glossy feature of the paper can be brought thanks to the bark, not to the pulp. So I thought that washi is something that usually uses bark But half century ago, I started to notice that the authentic washi started to disappear, and more paper using pulp came into the Japanese society. And now we start to also see machine-made washi, or the word washi is now being used in a mixed way, and I'm a bit disappointed about that. And 17 years ago, when there was this big earthquake in the northern Japan, I started a paper mill called the Kigami Kobo. I thought I wanted to show you some pictures, but as you can see on the right side, well, I established a paper mill called the Kigami Kobo. And here we have labels on each single paper, and these labels show the features of the paper. It shows that this paper is made of the mulberry grown by us, and it has been bleached in the snow, or it has been dried by steel metal or wooden metal. So you get to see the ingredients and the manufacturing method of each single paper, and the label on each paper shows all these information. Let me now talk about the raw ingredients. Please allow me to be very analog. And this is the mulberry orchard. And you can also see my paper mill. And when we harvest these, actually the mulberry trees are already 3 meters high. And that means we have to also make sure that they will not be debranching. So that's how we grow these mulberry trees. And we have plenty of snow in Niigata. Sometimes it snows up to 3 meters or 4 meters high. And so just before it snows in mid-October, November, the leaves will fall suddenly. And that's the time we harvest and we cut down the mulberry trees, and we use a chainsaw to cut them into pieces of 1 meter length. And this is what we do. And to make the difference very obvious, I came up with this sample. Please look at these different materials. When you try to peel the bark of the mulberry, of course we get rid of these small bumpy parts, and then we make it smooth. And when we curve it deeply, we come up with this style, which is called the nazekawa, which is a cut type of a bark. And you see some greeny parts being left. And when we go even deeper in cutting it off, so put it into rice. This is brown rice and white rice. And if you want to make sake from this rice, if this was a rice, you'll come up with a top purity sake. And on the very left, you see the bark, which has been bleached on the snow. This is when we bleach these barks used on the snow. And this is how the paper becomes white and whiter. And this is the one we get the bumpy parts out, going deeper, even deeper, and the bark bleached on the snow. These are the different ways of processing the bark. And later, we dry it on the plate. And I just wanted to show you some pictures here.
Can you take this? Yes, thank you. Like this. Before putting it on board, we put it in snow. We call it kangri in January or February. So the sun is very weak. So we're waiting for the stronger sun in March. But before that, we keep them in snow. And in March, we get it out from the snow and then put it on the board one by one. And when there is a snow, we can use the reflection light of the sun, and then the paper material becomes brighter. So small ones and the big ones are on the board. And we have the method using the wooden board or metal board, and the calligrapher can identify which one is which. So when we dye the paper, we apply the masking. So actually we use the starch as masking and then dye it and then put it in the water for washing. And when the paper is washed and the starch is removed, the color appears clearly. And while they are being washed, the paper on the metal board easily be deprived of colors, but color remains on the paper which was dried on the wood board. I don't know why. However, when we put it on the wooden board, the wood is also a cellulose, and with water they can inflate, and when it dried, it shrinks. The same as the paper. So the paper is large, and after drying, it shrinks. But if the paper is on the metal board, the metal itself does not shrink, but paper tries to shrink. So at first, when the paper is big, and if you release it from the board, it cracks and then it shrinks suddenly. If you are using the metal board. However, if you are using the wooden board, the surface increases, and as it dries, the surface area shrinks. The rhythm of inflation and the shrink is the same between paper and wood. However, we can dry it on the board only when the weather is nice, and we put it on the board at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we have to retrieve it at 3 o'clock. And the sun as of 9 o'clock and the sun at noon are completely different in the color of the paper because the strength of the sunlight is different. The weather condition is important. When the weather is cloudy, the color becomes blurred. And if there is a wind or if there is raining, we have to take the board into the house, like an evacuation. And then after that, if the weather continues bad, we have to keep the board and the paper in-house, and then the stains will appear on the paper. So the moisture is absorbed into the board, and before the stain comes up, if it's dry, it would be okay. However, if it takes long time to dry up, the stain appears from the board to the paper, and then the stain comes up on the paper. At first, I removed those stained paper as defects, but at some time I thought, if it's an artificial one, we can make a judgment. This is okay or this is a defect. However, It's a natural phenomenon, and we cannot avoid that. So, I myself cannot say it's good or it's defective. So now I don't say this is a defect, because it's not an intention of human. And the paper dried on the metal plate has a strength in the beginning. However, the paper dried on the wooden board is soft in the beginning. Of course, the strong paper is preferable. However, in 10 years' time, these features becomes opposite. The paper on the wooden plate becomes stronger, and the metal one is soft. So with absorption of moisture, it inflates and it shrinks. The paper always continue this inflation and shrinkage. It's something like a breathing. And then the paper grows and then withers. So the older the paper gets, the better it becomes. So in my experience, I was asked by a temple to dissolve an account book which was found in an old warehouse of merchants of Edo period. So actually I was asked to put it into hot water. However, that account book did not dissolve. I couldn't tear them up, or even the ink remained there. So the new paper can be dissolved very easily in the water. And then we can recycle them and we can make new paper once again. As I mentioned earlier, it is always said that the paper can be used 3 years after the generation. That's what calligrapher always say. So the years are very important for paper to become stronger. It requires 3 years to become full-fledged. So that's the estimate we have from our experience regarding the wooden materials. We, human, was born as a baby, and then we grow up to become an adult, and then withers and die. Every day, we inhale and exhale, and the life of paper is longer than human. However, the processes are the same. Not only the functions, but also why we want to use paper. If we think about that, it would be our mindset, because we can see the same life as human inside the paper. So we can be relaxed by paper, especially washi or kigami. That's why we want to use washi and kigami. So today I have come from Niigata, and there are some features in our papers. My father was the fourth generation, and I myself was the fifth generation of the family business. And my father was a farmer in summertime, and he made paper only in winter. So it was a side job. And I myself is making paper throughout the year. However, when I look back, my father was a professional paper maker, because he only made paper in the best season of winter, and the glue had the best performance in winter and also due to the hydrogen connection, the good performance, the temperature will be better when it's 4 degrees or so. So the paper making is the job in the winter.
And we have to remember that paper is something living, so we have to be sure that the raw ingredients is perishable, and during winter we don't have to be worried about getting rotten, but during summer, a week after boiling, we have to think of drying it. So we end up saying, okay, we have to do the removing of the non-purities in a very short term, and we will be rushed up. That means paper I make during the summer is not a professional paper, and only the paper made in winter is a true, authentic paper. And my father, because he was only doing paper making in winter, I can tell that my father was a true professional in paper making. And up to my father's generation, we were using these screens, and I will show you 3 different screens. These screens really decide the quality or the features of the paper. So let me just introduce to you to these different kinds of screens we have. And this is the Udazu braided screen, and this is the bamboo braided. And these are Kaya and Sha. And this one, the Kaya or the Miscanthus. Miscanthus, of course, there are different types of Miscanthus, not the big ones, but the very fine Miscanthus that grows at highlands are being used here. And we use the horse hair to braid this. Unfortunately, this is not horse, but my father rebraided it using fishing string. So you see the remains of the originally braided part, and my father re-braided it because we didn't have someone who could do that. But my father was able to do it. And my father even made tools to be able to braid these. And by increasing or decreasing the number of the bolt nuts to be used as weights, we can come up with the good balance of the braiding. And the biggest feature of this paper, that when we make the paper, you get to see a thin mark of the lines from the screen. It's a see-through paper, but you get to see the lines. But this is, in fact, the attribute of using the Kaya or the Miscanthus screen. And along with the time, screens also changed to the bamboo screen. But you can see with the bamboo, they're being joint or connected because the bamboos do have some lines here. And in Southeast Asia, the screens are having these lines on the bamboo, but in Japan, we make sure that there wouldn't be any lines coming out on the bamboo. So before the line comes, we make sure to join it. And professionals say that within a 3 centimeter width, how many bamboo strings can come in. And when I place an order, I tell my supplier that, for example, I need a screen which 30 bamboo strings will come within a width of 3 centimeters. And this one has 30 bamboo strings in a 3 centimeters width. And the finest ones can have even 60 bamboo strings in a 3 centimeter width. Depending on the paper variety or depending on the raw ingredients used, like, for example, the Diplomorpha, sometimes we really need a very delicate and fine screen. As you can see here, the strings here that braid and combine the bamboos gently appears on the paper. It comes out. And also the Samu, a Japanese jacket I am wearing now, this is also made of paper. And Sakurai Sadako-san, who is already 90 years old plus, made 7 jackets for me already. And usually I can continue to wear a jacket for 5 years. And that means I wash them for tens of thousands of times. This cloth is when the Samu jacket was originally made. And the one I'm wearing now is probably of 15, 16 years old. So the more you use, the more taste it will show. And this is the yarn being used. Let me show you. So they are being cut into 6 millimeter width, and it's being spun and yarn. And the bamboo screens should not have any bumps. That means if you don't want the lines to appear, we use this very thin, fine sheet of silk. And by having this silk sheet in between the bamboo screen and the paper, you really come up with a very smooth, flat paper. Depending on the purpose, you can change the way of using the screen. If you want to use the paper to have the light come through, the Miscanthus Kaya screen is very nice. Because there are not so many people who can make these screen, I also came up with this Uda braided screen. And well, this is made of bamboo, but it uses thick bamboo and thin bamboo in a row. And I asked Furuta-san in Mino area to make this for me, and he came up with this braiding method, and he calls this udatsu, braided method. So maybe this udatsu screen is something that is very uncommon and not many people know about the name of udatsu, but the point here is that the layers of these bamboos are made of the fat and the thin bamboo strings, and that allows the paper to be more three-dimensional, or we intentionally make sure that the marks come out. And it's like having a story using a lot of papers. And this is just what I explained to you now. I also have the Honmino washi rolled paper. Maybe it's a good time to show that to you now. But I think I needed to talk about other things before going on to my 7th topic. Well, when we think of designs in Japan, I think we always have a milestone. For example, I had a chance to visit Switzerland, Israel, and Bali in Indonesia. I have had the opportunity to hold workshops and also had the opportunity to live in these countries for a short time. And when I lived in those different countries, I got to know that in Europe, for example, there are wooden houses, but they're being painted. It's different from Japan, because in Japan, we intentionally leave the wooden grains out because we appreciate the design. And even the paper doors, if you go to Korea, they also do have the paper doors. But inside, you wouldn't see the wooden frames because you only see the paper. But I would like to show you this now. Here, this is one of the Japanese room in the paper mill of the Kigami Kobo that I own. And the wooden frames make it very special here. And do you see this? Well, today, in the modern days, paper for the shoji paper door is a very huge paper, just one sheet of paper. But a traditional one, even used for the tea ceremony, several papers are being patched. It's a patchwork. to intentionally show where the paper is being joined. And this roll paper was made half century ago by Mr. Furuta. And all the papers that I'm showing to you today is over 50 years old. And I think it's better to see this.
Here and here. When the papers are connected, you have to have a margin like this for a connection. So how many millimeters do you think? So maybe it's different between Kyoto and Yedo. But in Kyoto, this 2.8 millimeters is the margin regarded as the beautiful margin. So we are ethnic people who focus on the milestones, and also for tatami mattress, we usually have a margin and we think how we can beautifully connect them. And the experts said, what is your favorable size of the paper? Because the size of the paper is the core of the beauty, because Japanese people enjoy the margin. So when they apply them, that they have to be placed like a chessboard, a checkerboard. So those experts were very careful about having a good margin when they attach and join the papers. And I'm a paper maker, and the most artificial method for paper making and the other method is to allow the paper to become a paper like a river flows. So the difference is something like Tosa Tengu Joshi and Minowashi. And most of other papers were in between them. And today I like to show you these extreme examples using these books. So this is an extreme case. This one is great. The face is almost over the water. So the water in this device is now flowing freely in the air. So that's how this person is making paper. So this is Mr. Hamada, who is a living national treasure. And like this, on both sides, you can see the swirls. So in all photos, you can see the water is flowing all the time. And then in the end, the water is removed. On the other hand, the minowashi or honmino paper making. So this is the wife of Mr. Furuta making paper very slowly. So usually when you hit the Sugeto mold, and then the water splashes, and then the water level becomes even. So I always intentionally hit the mold. However, Mino people moves the mold in order to avoid a crash. So they move the mold very slowly, so vertically and horizontally, just allowing water to flow as they want. So it's not their intention, but they're just listening to the water voice So human is not a priority in their paper making. And the other one, this is a very artificial one, including intention of a paper maker. And because they have their own purposes for using the paper, or the purposes required are different each other. Again, this is almost 50-year-old Honmino, Usumino paper and Tengu Joshi paper. I want you to tell the difference. This is something like a heat haze, very light and glossy, and both of them are very thin paper. Both of them are very thin. It may be better. This one is Tosa Tengu Joshi. The material of the paper was washed repeatedly, and then only the cellulose is left. All the impurities were removed, so that's porous. And the other one, Honmino paper, so it's bleached. However, the impurities were not completely removed. And also, it can be used as a backup of the paperwork, or it can be used for lantern so that you can see through the light as much as possible. And this Tengu Joshi was a good export in the past. So it was used for wrapping the typewriters, or even recently, it is used for the repair of the ancient books. So it lasts more than 1,000 years, and it's very strong, and it doesn't hinder anything. So it's very popular paper in the world. So even if they are the same, because they are the paper, however, according to the purpose, the tools for paper making and the method of paper making are different because they are developed in times. Now time is running out, so let me show you this. So when I was given the theme of this symposium, I was asked to talk about the future. However, I myself want to bring past to the future. I'm not thinking about creating the future. Rather, I want to transform the past into the future. But I think we don't have to intentionally change the past for future. And I want to show you this meshu washi. But before talking about that, let me talk about this. So meshu washi is the paper made using the metal. This is Japan House construction site in Brazil. So before establishing the Japan House, the building was like this. And this is now a very good facility to introduce Japanese culture. So 22 years ago, Mr. Kuma, the architect Kuma, and I met each other. And this is the House of Light. And so we collaborated together to wrap the house with the washi paper, just like a cocoon. At that time, his request was to wrap the exterior walls with paper. However, wall is exposed to the natural conditions such as typhoons. So the request was very demanding. I didn't do that in the past. So I was not ready to do that. However, I was young at that time. So just for an experiment, I decided to do that because I can verify when it starts to break if I observe that. And of course, now the exterior wall and interior wall are having the moles, so we have to repair that from now on.
And the mesh steel screen washi was originally proposed by Emmanuel in France, and via the architect Kengo Kuma, I got the offer and request to come up with this metal mesh made paper. So we have this expand metal here, and we do paper making via this metal sheet. It's pretty much easy, and we just blend the sunset hibiscus, the Tororo Aoi, so the composition and the blending is really important. In any case, we use this metal sheet screen. And this is Ishal Newman, my apprentice. And we made this paper in Nantes, France, and my son is beside me. And Ishar also, I asked him to join us to do the paper making. And this is Emmanuel, the original client. And his business is to sell art pieces, and he wanted to use this paper made of metal screen as part of his exhibition. At first, I was a bit reluctant and hesitant to combine metal, which is very inorganic, to paper, which is organic. I can understand it theoretically, because when glass came into Japan, people were a bit feeling it odd. But today we use glass in our daily lives. So using plant-based ingredients and combining it with metal, this is eventually going to be something normal, but I was not able to mentally catch up with this idea because I really grew up in the nature. But then our entire space is diverse, and our space, or the world that we are living, has to progress. We are living in that kind of destiny. Then if we have to progress in any case, we should, as long as possible, as much as possible, try to hand down what we have received from our ancestors. And I always want to have something based on natural resources and nature. And even if we keep on progressing, my wish is that although we will be blending into with something inorganic, I still want some part of nature to be remaining. And I was told by the organizer I only have 3 minutes left, and this is the art, light art using paper, and it is used in a 7-meter high hall, and I hanged it by myself. And you see different shapes like circles, spirals, square, and we hang this metal sheet screen made paper. We just started this. And these are very good old days when I was 40 plus years old and my hair is still black. And this is in the paper mill of Ishar, my apprentice, and when we carried out the workshop. And Ishar too still has a lot of hair. Today he is bald. And Ishar and I keep a very good relationship. With the COVID pandemic, he's not been able to come to Japan, but we do communicate frequently. And 4 years ago, we got together and my family traveled to the Persian Bay and we traveled for 12 days together. And this is in Bali, Indonesia, using jackfruit bark. And on the drum can, in the drum, we boiled water and we used the coffee leaves to dry the paper. And I think I've been able to cover many things. And I just wanted to show you some workshop we carried out in Switzerland. And in Japan, we do have big, heavy tools, but we didn't have that in Switzerland. So we tried to compress paper using bolts and nuts. And this is the paper museum in Basel. Very good old memories I have. And this is Ishar and his family. They came all the way from Israel. And this is my family and Ishar's family. And we had a very good time together traveling on the boat. And Ishar is here. And he really likes the marumiya furikake, which is the dried condiments that we put on rice.
And again, this is with the family. Yugen Flower. So these are the private photos. And as you can see, I myself is not a systematic person, and I'm just quickly respond to what is happening. And I hope you have enjoyed my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Mr. Kobayashi, thank you very much. Please give him a big applause once again. Thank you very much.